Hi, my name is Tania Melnyczuk. I'm from the Autistic Strategies Network, and I also collaborate with Autism in Africa. And I'm here to interview Karen Muriuki, who is the founder of Kenyans Living with Autism. She also has a relationship with NetPlus, which she'll tell you about. She's a Bridge CRPD SDG Fellow, a founding member of Autism in Africa, where she provides CRPD training to other autistic people and to professionals. And there's a lot more that I could say about her, but let me have Karen saying some things about herself. Karen, welcome. Thank you for being here. And maybe before we get into all of these things that you are doing as one of Africa's most recognized names in autism advocacy, tell us a bit about how you discovered that you were autistic.
I discovered that I was, thank you so much for this very important opportunity just to highlight my my take. What I can tell you, my challenges of having found that I was autistic is when I was 21. I was formally diagnosed autistic in 1985. Now, during that time, they would mention that that I was moderately to severely mentally retarded. That's the word I can't use, unfortunately, but they said that I was autistic. So during that time, autism wasn't commonly known in the 80s and 90s, so not much. So and during that time, no one told me that I was autistic. I had to really find out for myself in my adult years. And you can even imagine, not a single family member telling you that you're autistic because of the fear and the shame and the stigma that that culminates into that.
And did you go to a special school, or did you go to a regular school? Did you kind of feel that you were different because of how you were schooled?
You know, during that time, there were no specialized schools. There was no special ed schools in the 80s and 90s. None at the moment. There were none. So because of that, a lot of autistic people in Kenya still face a lot of stigma. And I had to really go to a regular school, and I faced very, very multiple barriers. And that also includes being excluded, being emotionally abused and bullied. And I really struggled to make friends as a result of my disability. So there was lack of understanding about autism during that time. So, but towards, I think, I would say late 98, there was a specialized school I was lucky enough to have gone to, and I was so happy to have gotten the help that I needed. But before that, there was no specialized schools during the 80s and early 90s.
Right. So if I'm piecing together this timeline now, you were basically diagnosed with what they called mental retardation when you were young. And then it wasn't until you were 21, I think you said, which would be now 20 years ago, because you're 41 now. So it's only been for half of your life that you've really known that you were autistic. What was it that got you to start searching for answers? How did that process start?
I started looking at videos on YouTube. You know, you get resources from YouTube. You look at your traits, and even in the psychiatrist report that specifically stated that that I was autistic. And I realized, oh my God, these are some of the characteristics that I have in relation to my autism. So like, I was hyperactive, I was socially withdrawn, you know, some of those things that that psychiatrists see as quote unquote deficit in social interaction. So they see that. Yeah, so I've started self-discovering myself when I was like watching from YouTube videos and learning from actual autistic people, their experiences. And some of those videos, you get the sense that, oh, okay, this is what I go through. This is what I've been going through all these years without even being told that I was autistic. I had to really find out for myself through watching those going online on the internet.
And how has your feelings about yourself or maybe your situation in life or who you are, how did that change after you discovered that you were autistic?
It changed my life for the better. But what I would really say, primarily, I really struggled a lot with my mental health, and I had even suicidal thoughts about that. And then when I discovered that, okay, this might not really help, and I'd realized that if I'd never gotten the help that I needed, I would end up being here speaking to you right now. But I've been able to, look for ways to really help me cope in an environment that isn't built for me. Just to look at whatever works well with me, and just see that if there is anything that really makes me happy, so be it. It's all about self-care.
Oh, yeah. And how did it come about from that point of self-discovery, self-exploration to eventually founding Kenyans Living with Autism?
From that point on, after that kind of self-discovery, I just imagined myself, deciding that, I just had enough of just feeling inadequate. I just had enough, and I needed to just stand up for myself. There's some point in your life when you just feel like, you know what, you can't just let people just run over you and just make you feel so inadequate and feeling so inferior because they had this kind of divisiveness towards you. So I decided, you know what, I need to speak for myself, and that's the reason why I formed this organization, in order for me to reach out to not just actual autistic people, even to parents of autistic kids, to make them realize that, their child is human, just like everybody else. What they need now is just unconditional love and acceptance, to what I didn't get even now. Even when I was a child, and even today as an adult, I never got that kind of unconditional love. So that's the reason as to why I just decided I wanted to.
All right, so we've lost Corin there for a moment, and this is a typical situation that we have where bandwidth can become quite difficult between Kenya and elsewhere, and Corin is reconnecting at the moment. So we've got Corin who's just come back. So Corin, we were just talking about what made you decide, or how did you get to the point of establishing Kenyans Living with Autism, and how did you do that? Like, did you make a Facebook
I decided
page,
to do this because
how did you get everybody together who's now in the group?
Yeah, I decided to do it because I just felt, you know what, enough is enough. I just didn't want to feel very inadequate. I needed to, stand up for myself, be assertive, be me. I just want to be me, and just embrace myself and embrace my whole identity. The fact that I am able to just do things the way I want. And that's the reason why I formed this organization to form this organization, in order I could reach out to parents and other people who are in the same disposition as I am, in order for them to just accept their children, in order for them to be educated and learn about autism from an actual autistic experience. Because most of the time, when you hear about autism, you hear from autism professionals. And when we talk about the principle of nothing about us without us, it means that when you talk about a certain disability, the people that should be leading the cause are actual disabled people. And you can imagine, there's, in all the autism organizations that we have in Kenya, there's not a single one that is represented, that is led by actual autistic people. So that was the reason why I decided, you know what, let me form this organization, so that in order I could do this, that is strictly led by actual autistic people, in order to ensure that parents are well informed and educated about autism from an actual autistic experience.
Now, when I've tried, and I think you've tried as well, to reach out to autistic people across Africa to find other groups who are doing something similar, we found that it's really hard to find them. And it's even hard to find individual people who are autistic in every African country, even with us being from using English as a lingua franca, even just in the English speaking, the Anglophone countries. What advice do you have for somebody else, somewhere else in Africa who has a similar experience to get together other autistic people? What did you do? Did you do something like make a Facebook group, or how did you find everybody else?
I just decided to form a Facebook group. Initially, I wanted it to just be for actual autistic people, but I realized that, yeah, there are parents of autistic children who also need help. Who want to really help their kids out there. And I also met up with other autistic Kenyans who whom I met in person as well. And it was such an experience to do that. Yeah, so basically it was it was like a one-on-one experience. Like when you meet someone in an event that obviously I know for a fact that it was not led by actual autistic people, but anyway, I met an autistic adult and then we bonded, and then now I also met other autistic adults in person, and it was like that. But when I was forming the groups, I realized that there are also parents of autistic children who also need help. And many a times parents are trying to look for schools for their kids, which has become so scarce and not inclusive to autistic children. So I just decided, you know what, let's just invite parents over and then they can, and also professionals as well. So yeah.
Right, and this is also a problem we have in South Africa. It's one of the big problems of just schools that are prepared to take autistic children in South Africa. And it's one, that everybody's supposed to be in school, but then none of the schools actually want to take your autistic child, and so it becomes super hard. And so that we then get involved with parents because we have a common cause there. Tell me a little bit about Netplus. What is Netplus? What does it do? What do you do there?
Yeah, it can be a bit, it can be a very big difficult scenario because I mean like 3 parent-led groups, and what I do is just educate parents about autism and make them realize, I know you're trying your best you can to now understand about autism, how to enter into the realm of autism, especially now that you know that your child is now autistic, has just been diagnosed on the spectrum. And you're trying to navigate the world and trying to figure out, okay, what are the supports that I need to help my child to thrive. And many times parents really give up and they don't know what else they can do. And so they get to do certain things that majority of us here, majority of autistic people in Africa, including myself, are not comfortable with. And I use that within my position as an actual autistic person to just say, okay, what you're doing is wrong. Can you allow me to educate you? Can you at least try and let me educate you in the right way, in the right direction, at least to offer the right appropriate support to your child without having to take the wrong route.
That brings us to another group that you're also involved in, another international movement, which is the Ban ABA movement. And you've been a panel member more than once there. The one time was earlier in 2022 when you were on the Global Disability Summit talking against ABA. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your views there and how you're part of the Ban ABA movement? What are your feelings about ABA? What's happening in Africa in ABA? What is ABA? And
yeah, I think with the conversion therapy, it is, now let us look at in a scenario of ABA.
Okay, we're losing you a little bit there on the sound. We've lost you slightly on picture and we're losing you a bit on sound. If Sound just went away for a moment, so I'm going to just repeat that question again. Maybe I should split it up into areas for those who are, I'm going to guess that our audience knows that ABA is applied behavior analysis, and that they know that most autistic people object to this form of therapy and don't even consider it a therapy. But what is happening in Kenya and in the rest of Africa with ABA? What's the deal there?
Yeah, it's been implemented already in several schools. I mean, they also want to try and do that within Parliament, but I actually want to voice my concerns about that because it goes against the principle of the CRPD and what we're being taught here in the module 2 of the bridge training, where we come up with policy papers. We've already done draft policy papers based on all the articles that you've chosen on all the CRPD article. I chose Article 19, but I want to talk about Article 16 and what it says, if you allow me to talk about Article 16. Now, what does Article 16 of the CRPD talks about? Freedom of exploitation, violence, and abuse. But the main article, which I think it's so important that the Kenyan Parliament just doesn't seem to understand, is Article 15 of the CRPD that talks about freedom from torture or cruel and inhuman or degrading treatments or punishment. And that means Kenya must ensure that no one is tortured or treated in a cruel or inhumane manner. I'm quoting this from Article 15 of the CRPD. I'm going to quote, and it says, countries are to make sure that no one is tortured or treated in a cruel, inhumane, or degrading way. In particular, countries are to take steps such as making laws or other rules to make sure that people with disability are not forced to take part in medical or scientific experiments. Now here we're talking about ABA. And I personally have been against ABA all through because I went through some form of ABA myself, but not within a school system, but within family, which has become so, I wish experience.
Right, we've lost Corinne again, a little for sound. So I'm going to just be pausing that recording until we've got her back. Okay,
yeah,
not a problem. So you were telling us about the CRPD. Now, for those who don't know, the CRPD stands for what?
The CRPD stands for the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Right.
And it is like...
And most African countries have signed that, right?
Yes, they have. They have signed it. And they have ratified. Like now, Kenya, I will talk a bit about Kenya. Having ratified the CRPD, having signed the CRPD in 2008. Now they are to ratify it, and they've also written, what we're learning now in module 2 is for them to, now there's a CRPD committee that comprises of 18 people who are part of the CRPD committee. And that means that a Kenyan representative has to write a report on whether or not they're implementing the CRPD to its full capacity. Now, you spoke a bit about ABA, how is it in Kenya and also in Africa? It is it's extremely very rampant. It's extremely very rampant, and obviously that's a violation of Article 15 of the CRPD that I've just stated about. And I can even repeat again because I know we were dealing with some technical issues on my end. It's freedom from torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. And I've talked about that countries have to ensure that nobody is tortured or treated in a cruel or inhumane manner. In particular, that secondly, countries are to make steps in ensuring that in making laws or other rules to make sure that people with disability are not forced to take part in medical or scientific experiment. And that means ABA, which is also a violation of the Article 15 of the CRPD. Now, and based on that, yeah.
Sorry, interrupted you. No, please do finish. Yeah, you wanted to say something more?
Yeah. So now ABA being one of those violators of Article 15. And it's one of the key areas that has one of the key medical or scientific treatments, which goes against the what Article 15 stands for.
Yeah, and as we've been discovering, especially over the last 2 years, really, there's been all these claims always that it's evidence-based. And when we mention the word science, and that's what they've often said, and when we look at the scientific evidence for ABA, we find that it doesn't align to the requirements for good science. It doesn't align to the Declaration of Helsinki, which medical research has to align to, that the research, really does fall under what you say it falls under, which is cruel and inhuman experiments. Because if we take a look at the content of those experiments, which supposedly prove this evidence-based thing, it doesn't work the way that experiments on humans are supposed to work. It does actually align to torture. There's no consent, So you were mentioning, as you were talking about this, and you were saying that in Module 2, you are right now in a hotel receiving training, right?
Yeah.
Which is called the
Bridge
CRPD SDG training, and you are a Bridge SDG, well, that long word. Tell us what does all that mean? Like, what is this training that you're getting, and what do you learn there?
All right, so the Bridge SDG CRPD training is a training program where participants with disabilities get to learn about all matters to do with the CRPD. That is module 1, learn about all the articles of the CRPD. Then you are tasked in writing a policy paper on, and meaning that you'll have to choose one article, one CRPD article, and then you come up with a policy paper. You make a structure, the findings and the recommendations based on the article that you have written. So in module 1, you learn all the articles of the CRPD, and also you can also learn about the sustainable development goals. And now in article 2, now in module 2, now you learn about the just about the sustainable development goals and how you can utilize that in the CRPD. And you come up with I think, if you can allow me, I can share the agenda of what we're learning in module 2. In module 2, you're learning on understanding public policy. Number 2, you're taught about inclusive program design. Number 3, you need to come up with the data. And number 4, the legal humanitization. And number 5, the CRPD compliance in budget advocacy. So those are the agenda. I will post that in the chat right now, so that at least you know what we're learning in module 2. And then now within that time frame, now each and every one of us who have come up with policy papers are to present the policy papers based on the articles that you have chosen, and you work through that, and you must explain the structure, the findings, and then also what are your recommendations for that base article. It's like you're pitching something.
Yeah, so this is basically something that would then go to somebody in government, right, to say to them, this is how you should change things.
Yes.
Right. So you go a little bit beyond, in terms of advocacy. What you've been trained into is a little bit beyond just somebody who's like on Twitter screaming like, they're not right to us. This is actually the real trying to get through to the actual people who are supposed to make the changes. Right.
Yeah, and of course you have to also meet with the stakeholders in government stakeholders, and also the UN, and then the people from the United Nations as well. So to engage them, not just to local government, like here in Kenya, we have an organization called the United Disabled Persons of Kenya, which is a national body. And then now when it goes to continental, we have the African Disability Alliance. And then internationally now it is the International Disability Alliance, which we're also who are the facilitators of this training. Now, in this case, we're going to be engaging with government stakeholders, both locally, continentally. Continentally, we deal with Africa Disability Alliance, and then we also have someone from the UN that we are going to be engaging with, especially when we are implementing the policy papers.
Okay, that's fantastic. And for people who are not into all of this, autistic people or allies of autistic people, you are currently doing training yourself for people who just want to learn more about the CRPD, more about their rights, or more about the rights of the people that they are serving, or about their own children's rights. And that is as part of Autism in Africa, and which has a Twitter account, which has got a Facebook account, which has got a website, which is up and coming. So can people from other continents who maybe their countries have also signed the CRPD, can they also join your training?
Yes, they can. It's so important that they really need to know about this, because it's so important that they need to understand about the rights of autistic people. If they don't have that kind of training and they are unable to utilize that, it's so important that you raise this, because it's so important that autistic people really need to learn about all matters to do with the CRPD in order for them now to advocate for their rights, to understand their rights, just like everybody else. And they can utilize that to point out some of the violations that we've seen on a daily basis, especially with abusive therapies and quote unquote cures that we've witnessed throughout.
Well, one of the things that I found myself from being in your training sessions that I really liked that you did was that you worked from a plain text version of the CRPD, where instead of like using the fancy language, it simplifies it a bit more, making it easier for us to understand. And then with every article of the CRPD, which is like, I suppose an article of the CRPD is like a heading with bulleted points underneath it, you explain how that applies to autistic people. Like you were talking through, I think it was Article 2 earlier this evening, or 3, because I'm so terrible with my numbers, the one where it says like why it's so important that non-speaking autistic people have to have communication access, and what is not happening there and what should be happening there. And that's what makes the training really practical from an autism perspective. And I also find what is so helpful with you doing it as a CRPD training is, like in South Africa, we've got our own laws and we've got our own disability stuff, and in Kenya you do too, but we're all united by the fact that many countries have signed and ratified the CRPD. So all of our policies are supposed to be looking at that. And if we know that, then as activists across the world, it can really, it's something that applies to all of us and all of our advocacy. It just plays itself out a little bit differently in the different countries. You also appeared briefly last year on World Disability Day. You were one of the African perspective speakers with the Zekwande Foundation, which is based in South Africa, and Zekwande is a non-speaking autistic activist, and you were able to share your views there. What was it like for you kind of meeting Zekwande, although maybe it wasn't like completely synchronous, but you know, having him there spelling out his thoughts without speaking? Was that a new experience for you? Because you've been very passionate about non-speaking.
Yeah, obviously it was. Yeah, it was. Obviously it was, because obviously we can apply it to our situation here in Kenya. You see, even this, just about a few hours ago, I got messages from parents who really want to know about how can I get the communication fast, because they still think it's like, you know, like an iPad like thing. They don't know about spelling as communication. I don't know how I'm supposed to explain that to them, but anyway, you'll help me out on that. But anyway, going back to what you've mentioned, it was a very good experience meeting with Zekwande and understanding what he says, which is so important to understand that non-speaking people matter, and the fact that these are the most vulnerable groups of people who have been violated a whole lot, who have been denied reasonable accommodations, who have been denied access to communication mediums, which which I would be very cross disability inclusive, that is assistive devices that non-speaking people require. And it's also covered, as you mentioned, under Article 2A of the CRPD that talks about communication. Communication in the autistic community is a human right, and people really need to realize that non-speaking people matter. You must respect their communication. You must respect the fact that their communication matters. You shouldn't deprive them of their communication. And that was what Zikwande was insisting. The fact that you should presume competence, the fact that you should be listening to him, people like him. They have they have so much to say. He has so much to say, and he has so much to tell the world, that he's like everybody else, but his communication and that his ability to think through things matter. And that is the most important thing I've learned from Zikwande.
Yeah, and our task is actually huge, because we have, well, if I go by my estimate, about 3 million non-speaking autistic people in Africa who are currently receiving no help for their communication in the way that Zikwande is privileged to have. And, you know, it matters to him, it matters to you, it matters to me, and it matters to so many of us. What are some of the challenges that you are currently facing? Well, let me ask this, let me split it into you. What are some of the challenges that you've had in your life just as an autistic person until now? And what are some of the challenges that you face as an activist for the rights of autistic people? Let's split it into two.
Okay, let me do my challenges as an autistic person here is just acceptance. Is that just acceptance and understanding. That's the two main areas that I still struggle with, is just acceptance and understanding, and lack of understanding, because you meet people who are just very overtly very ableist and overtly abusive. So yeah, those are the two things that I still grapple with even today. Number two, as an autistic self-advocate, I could really say that there's lack of representation among autistic people, because there are not many autistic people who want to come out and just self-advocate, because you see, many want to learn about their rights, and most of the time people don't want to come out because they're being silenced, they're being told, oh, you know, you're not amount to anything, you know, things like this as an activist. So it's like, it's very hard.
I want to ask something. It was not something that was on our agenda, but you reminded me of something, that there is a restaurant in Nairobi, which started up recently, called Neurosoul Cafe, which hires neurodivergent people. You've been there. Can you tell us just a little bit about, like, how on earth did this, who started that? You've got some friends who work there, and it seems like it's really cool.
Yeah. It's a very good, Ayira Neurosoul Cafe was started by a mother to a 4-year-old autistic daughter. And its main purpose is to highlight the challenges in employing persons with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities in the workforce. And we've decided that this, because most restaurants, like there's another cafe that hires those with hearing impairment. It's called Palettes Cafe. It's within Nairobi. So we came up with an idea that, okay, there's a restaurant that hires those with physical disabilities, but what about those with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities? How are they? Where are those people? Where are they in your neurodivergent community? Yeah. So we just came up with that kind of an idea that we, you know, we need to form a restaurant, and this was actually from a mother who formed this restaurant that just only hires those with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities, because that's the number that, this is one group of people that have been left out so much, especially in the workforce environment. A lot of times in Kenya, when you trying to get a job, let's say in a government office, they only look at the physical part of the disability. They don't look at the the hidden disability, which I can, which in standards that I can't use. They ignore those with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities because they think that it is not included, and that is the wrong approach that people have. So they just said, we've decided, enough is enough. Let's just hire those with neurodivergent individuals so that at least they have the same equal opportunities as those with physical disabilities.
And I've seen pictures from there. It just really looks like it has a cool vibe. It looks like it's got good food, and as if the customers are enjoying it. So, and as if the people who work there are also proud to be working there. So, not walking around looking patronized or anything like that. And maybe gives a vision of what the world could be like if people that accept it. Now, look, we've talked a lot about all the difficulties and the struggles and all these kinds of things. You also have a pretty strong interest in music. Tell us a bit about the instruments you play. Where do you play, sing? What do you do? And what do you play?
Okay, I'm a pianist. I'm an ABRSM trained student at Conservatoire. I'm doing my ABRSM in the month of November, but I'm also a bass player as well. I've not been playing for a while, because of this pandemic, which has kind of grinded everything to a halt. But I'm also a member of the choir council, so I'm kind of getting back into everything still, but at a gradual pace, because I know but I love what I do. Obviously, it has rejuvenated me in a way. Yeah.
Okay, so
I wish I would talk more, but
it's piano at like a really super high fancy level, like beyond what I can play piano. It's bass, it is singing, and you're in a choir. Your church, where do you go to church?
I go to Don Bosco Upper Hill Catholic Church. Yes, I fellowship there.
All right. And what is it like being autistic in church, or in maybe autistic in that church? You can.
Yeah, it's quite difficult because not many people understand what autism is all about, because people you struggle to make friends, just like the way I really struggled to make friends when I was younger. So it's like the same kind of thing, and there's lack of understanding about autistic people in general, and autistic people get really shunned, and it's quite hard. But there are many people who understand, and they're understanding towards me because I educate them. I really educate them from my own experience, and I tell them, okay, yes, these are my struggles. So just be very accommodative to me. Just offer that kind of reasonable accommodation that I require. And speaking about it, I'd even suggested that we form an organization just for those with disabilities in general, because I came up with that kind of an idea to ensure that individuals with disabilities are included in the church environment, because they still face a lot of stigma because of the relatively stigma, they're excluded and all that. So I just felt that it was time that we formed that organization that is just primarily led by people with disabilities.
Right, so disability awareness and acceptance in the church environment is one of your focus areas. What other focus areas do you have in advocacy? Because we know, like, we can't, some of us focus perhaps on gender issues, some of us focus on things like institutionalization and abuse. Like we try to do everything, but we can't always get to everything. What are some of your other areas which you tend to focus on more?
In terms of advocacy, like in the autism bit, it's just advocating for non-speaking people to have accessibility, also to be taught about to use spelling as communication, because one of the areas that I look at right now is why non-speaking people forced to use sign language, and we have to realize their motor skills are not fully developed. So that is what one of my key areas is to ensure that non-speakers have other ways of communicating other than just speech and sign language, which I think which works, but you have to look at does it work for several non-speaking people? No, it doesn't work for some non-speakers. So you have to think of other ways that you can be accommodative to them. Yeah.
Okay, and what are your if it is possible to articulate it, what are your big dreams for autistic people in Africa? You know, how do you see, like, by the time I die, I would love to see things change. How would you articulate some of that?
I just want them to be able to self-advocate for themselves, you know, especially non-speaking Africans, because there's so many of them who have been hidden and who have been told that they're not worth anything. I just want them to know that, you know, they matter, and just to ensure that they have the numbers, because we don't have the numbers in Africa. There are very few autistic Africans who fear that they might be reprimanded or be retaliated against. What I really want autistic Africans to do is just to gain the knowledge and the independence for them to just self-advocate for themselves.
And for the next few years, what are you going to focus on to try to get there? I think maybe to some extent you've already answered those questions by talking about your focus areas. But if we take a look at your, like, yeah. what is your diary being filled up with over the next few months, maybe?
I think for me, the next few months is just to teach people about the CRPD. That's the most important document for autistic people, and into ensuring that they also understand about their rights in compliance with the CRPD. And that's the most important thing. And to just help them just to speak out and self-advocate. That's like my ultimate dream for now, because you have to take small steps to get there first. First, we need to help them understand their rights first before we move on to other notable things that they can do. And yeah, those are the most important things that we need to fulfill.
Well, Karen, it's been wonderful talking to you. You are one of my all-time favorite people to work with, and an absolutely wonderful friend as well. And it's been just absolutely inspiring to just have it all in a compact form. I mean, I know we talk regularly, but the way just seeing your life like in a glance within this time that we've spent together, and I'm so happy to be able to share this with the world now. So go well for the rest of the evening. Enjoy the rest of your CRPD training, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.